Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being patient with our technical difficulties. So we're starting Getting Your Foot in the Door, Landowner Outreach and Project Generation. I'm Nick Rossi. I'm a land protection specialist for DCR, working mainly in the Connecticut Valley. I've been doing land protection for about 10 years now. And Lee, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi all, my name's Lee Halasz. We say Halasz like palace, but that is not how my Hungarian grandfather would pronounce it. I've been associated with Kestrel Land Trust for about 10 years, initially as a TerraCore, AmeriCorps program. I then went to UMass and did a couple of master's degrees and was working there, and I'm now back at Kestrel the last 3 years, and I'm going to be talking to you about a project that I've been working on in that time. Kestrel Land Trust operates in the central area of the Connecticut River Valley. Northampton, Amherst, draw a big circle, that's the core area, but we can certainly work up and down the Connecticut River Valley. We did merge with Valley Land Trust some years ago that does have land holdings all up and down the valley.
Okay, and so I'll be talking about basic strategies and techniques for doing landowner outreach for land conservation, and Lee will be talking about a excellent case study. So working in the land protection field, we all have those properties that we really wish we could be working on, those landowners we really want to connect to. I feel like so much of what we do is just reacting to people, but we always want to, all of us kind of want to be able to spend more time reaching out to those key properties. So this presentation is about how you can do that outreach better and maximize your chances of connecting with those people. So just to start off, I think it's important to just acknowledge that there are a lot of different factors that might motivate a landowner to conserve their land. Anything from finances to just altruism of wanting to do good for the world, and combinations of all these things. But the important point here is that you don't want to make assumptions when you're doing your outreach of what people will find important. So it's good to try to weave in different kinds of reasons for why someone might conserve their land in your materials. I also highly recommend everyone to take a look at Their Land, Their Legacy. It's an excellent publication put together by Paul Catanzaro and others. It's available for free on masswoods.org. It has lots of great information on different factors that motivate landowners, how landowners prefer to engage with different resources, and a lot of this presentation is kind of drawing from some of the materials that's in that. So landowners may have all these motivations to conserve their land, but they haven't actually taken any action to do so. And I've been of the opinion for some time that when you're reaching out to people, I kind of feel like you're almost, like when a project starts, you're almost kind of meeting someone halfway. Like someone's already got some preconditions for why they might want to be conserving their land. You know, there just might be the right time in their life, like they're approaching retirement, or they just retired, or they're reaching a certain age. And you know, those things aren't really in our control. But the things that are in control that might prompt action are things like lack of information, which is a really big one. So like just the fact that the landowner doesn't even know that you're interested in conserving that property. Like that's like, you know, that's the easiest part, right? But it can also be like the other thing to keep in mind are things like a person having comfort and trust in you. And so I'm going to talk a little bit later on about how you can make a good first impression. So before your outreach, I encourage you to think a bit about how these properties fit into the bigger picture, because it can help you craft a better story for that landowner, for why their property is important to protect and why you want to do that. So I have up a map of the Holyoke Range here. This is one of the main areas that I currently work in at DCR. And you're seeing like just all of the biomap layers for the Holyoke Range, which is a lot. And so, you know, when I talk with landowners, I often, you know, we'll tell them about like how the Holyoke Range is like a hotspot for biodiversity, and the property is really important for all these rare species and that sort of thing. So, and being able to like tell a good story will just make your interactions with the landowner much richer, and make your story more compelling. Going along with that, it's also really great to talk with your partners regularly. Share what your priorities are. It can help dredge up a lot of information, people you know, people you've been talking to, people you've been talking to for years. Oh, this person doesn't really like, probably doesn't like government, maybe not the best idea for DCR to reach out to them. You know, you can cover a lot of things like that. It's also great because when you're thinking about doing like bigger initiatives or something like that, you've kind of already done some of your homework already because you kind of know what each other's priorities are, you know each other, so that always helps. And so a lot of the, in the past, a lot of what I've done is have regular meetings in specific regions with different people. So when I used to work at Mass Audubon before I was at DCR, and I used to have a group of us that would meet quarterly that worked in the Blackstone Valley. And we just kind of talk about what we're working on, and that actually yielded some really cool projects. So a few different methods of contact that I'm going to be covering. Just so we're all on the same page, I think letters self-explanatory, but interpersonal connections, I mean people that the landowners know, like someone who can be, that might be an ambassador for you, so to speak, someone who can make an introduction for you. Trying to find those connections is like one of the best things. I'm also going to talk a little bit about events, which are like, I'm talking about like having like a little session where you invite people in a specific area and then you talk about how land conservation works. Also keep in mind that people prefer to engage with information in different ways. Some people might react really well to an in-person meeting. Other people more likely to respond if they just get a letter. They don't want you in their face or anything like that. So that's just something good to keep in mind. So general strategies, I like to keep things simple, partially for the reason of what I talked about earlier, where to a certain extent, there's only so much you can do when you reach out to people. You can make a really good impression, but if they've got something going on in their lives that just makes it such that they don't have the time or the interest in conserving their land, you might just not get them at the right time. So I don't think it's worth spending like sinking a ton of time into the outreach of one landowner or something like that. But at the same time, it's also good to think long-term. A lot of times you're just starting a conversation when you're doing this outreach. You might talk to someone once, and then it doesn't work out, and then you talk to them again 3 years from now, or you have multiple conversations over years, and eventually a project starts. Or they'll put your letter in a desk, and then they won't call you back for 5 years, which has happened. And then also really important to try to catch their attention, particularly with letters. Because landowners get a lot of communication, solar developers, realtors, they're reaching out to them all the time. And people are also busy. So trying to make sure they pick up your information is really helpful, of course. So this is what I call my cold call letter. This is kind of like my template of what I send to people that I customize for each particular property. Just to break down what I'm doing here, so the first paragraph, I am talking about who I am. I'm also advertising my credentials. I work for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We protect a lot of land. Just kind of giving the person a bit of confidence that you know what you're talking about. Second paragraph, I'm telling them why I'm reaching out to them. And I always try to write in something specific to the property, and then something accessible as well. So nothing too technical, like I might say that property is really important for amphibians. It's next to the New England Trail, which is a nationally designated scenic trail, something like that. Something that makes it so that it's not mass-produced. It doesn't feel mass-produced. It feels like you actually thought about this before you sent the letter to them. And I also say, I found your information from publicly available sources, just hopefully so I don't creep them out that I found them. And then a brief description of how one conserves their land. So note here that I'm not doing a lot. I'm just kind of saying basic things. You can do a regular sale, I mean like a fee sale of your property, or there's this thing called a conservation restriction. So I think it's okay not to tell people a whole bunch of information about conservation in these letters. If they have if they have questions, that's great, because then they can call me and then they can ask me those questions. So I think as long as you can kind of just share like the basic information, that's all you need to do. And then I always include a map. So this is an example of a type of map I might send. The colors are coming out a little weird on the projector here, but anyway, you can see it's very simple, very clean design. The words "your property" is very deliberately chosen. It's meant to be very neutral. I'm not saying like priority acquisition parcel or something like that, you know. Just something that doesn't seem too crazy. Sometimes I might throw in something like a biomap layer that says like core habitat or something like that. Again, trying to keep the language simple, but something to advertise like why this property is important visually. And then on presentation of the written material, so I'm a believer in handwriting letters if you write well. As you can see from my letter, I do not write well, so I do not handwrite my letters. But I think a simple handwritten envelope is really great, because I mean, just think to yourselves of like, when was the last time you got a handwritten letter or a handwritten envelope? Like it doesn't happen that much. And so if you get something like this, it seems like a real person like actually wrote this. It wasn't just like someone didn't churn out like 50 of these and just mailed them out. And so more likely to open it. I started doing this when I was at Mass Audubon, because I used to have a much cleaner letter and I wasn't getting as many responses. And I had a feeling that maybe people were just throwing out my letter because they thought I was asking them for money. So this seemed to work a little better. And then, of course, keep your tone professional at all times. Okay, so this is about finding interpersonal connections with the landowner. So again, meeting with your partners regularly is very helpful to that end. I will often come up with maps or lists that I will share with people. Obviously, you want to be careful about how you share that information, but the goal is to try to see where you could find a connection to someone. That's really like being able to find someone that they know is kind of like is the best. Like that's most likely to hear back from someone. I will also share lists with people within my organization, especially someone who's I know has been in the area. Like I have a guy who at DCR who lives in Coleraine. He knows basically everyone in town, so he can tell me who they are and their whole backstory. It seems like for pretty much everyone. So finding people like that is very helpful. As I say here, people often respond best to people that they know, particularly if you're feeling a little cautious about doing land conservation. So a bit about events. So I actually don't do a lot of events because they are a lot of work. So we're kind of thinking about cost benefit of doing them. I think they work great as follow-up to other communications. So if you sent them a letter, maybe send them a postcard about how you're going to, have a webinar or host a brunch or something like that. The ideal is if a neighbor, or even better, if a landowner that you're working with can host the event, because then they can kind of vouch for you a little bit. And I think they're paired really well with initiatives. So if you're doing like a landscape scale project or something like that. A bit more about initiatives. So when I say a conservation initiative, I'm talking about things like if you're applying for like a landscape partnership grant or something like that. I think it works best when there is a funding strategy behind it. So like just sending people letters saying like, I have an initiative at the Holyoke Range is like nice, but it's better if you can say that you have funding. And also that it's kind of doing a couple things. So you're saying you have money, so that's always helpful. You're saying that you're working with a group, and it's part of this larger thing. So the conservation of their individual property is augmented more by the conservation of all this other land. So it means even more than it does and just on its own. And the idea as well is to create like a sense of opportunity. So like there's like, why conserve my land now? Because there's an initiative right now, they're applying for a grant, and isn't this great? There's this whole big thing happening, I should be a part of this. You're a part of this thing. So that can kind of get some people to start to take action. Okay, and so I kind of think of the first conversation that you have with landowners as part of the outreach, because this is really like you're making your first impression, and kind of setting the foundation for your subsequent conversations. So I always thank them for responding. That's like the first thing I do. Show a lot of gratitude and respect for people calling me back or willing to meet with me. Because when you think about it, I mean, you don't know what their relationship is to land. It might just be a guy who just bought this as like a speculative investment like 10 years ago. He's never been to it. He doesn't care. He just wants the money for it. But it could be like other people where they've lived on the property their whole life. Like the land is like almost part of the family, and so when they're thinking about selling the property, it's like a big thing. So lots of thanks and respect for them to take that big moment of giving me a call. Any land protection person will tell you lots of careful listening is really important for those early conversations. Just getting a sense of what motivates the person. What they're looking to accomplish, and then also convey competence. So by that I mean, show that you talk about like how conservation works. Give them a little bit of information about the process. Again, I try not to bury people in information in like these first meetings. It also depends on how the first conversation goes. So you kind of have to roll with it. Some people have lots of questions right away. But then also show that you did your homework. So like, you're able to like kind of say like, oh yes, yeah, I can tell you like all about like why your property is important for the Holyoke Range. And then I always try to create an opportunity for follow-up. So sometimes that's really easy. Like I've had people call me back and they're just like thrilled that their property is important for conservation. When can I come out and take a look at the property? I want to hear all about it. That's great. But then other people, can be a little more cautious. Again, because if this is this really important thing for them, they don't know you. They want to know that this is like that this is their property is going to be in good hands, and that this is going to be a good process for them. So sometimes I'll say, well, I can do, especially if they're interested in like ecology or something like that. I'll say like, well, I can do a walk around the property with you if you want, and then I can kind of give you a report of what I see. That can be a nice way to kind of keep the conversation going if they're not sure. I also will just say like, well, why don't I, because you never know when you're going to get these calls. I've gotten calls at like 4 o'clock on a Friday, and my brain is fried. So like, say like, well, I'd love to like just take a little more time to like think about your property in a little more detail, and then maybe we can find a time to meet like in person or something like that. And then people will often say, well, do I have to like, is there any like expectations from this? Like, absolutely no expectations. We're just having a conversation. Just kind of making people feel comfortable. and never be pushy. That is never helpful, in my opinion. Because a lot of these things are, these projects are, it can be long term. It can take a long time. So the first time you reach out to someone, like I was saying earlier, might not work out. It might just be the start of a long conversation that may eventually lead to conservation of the property. So it's really, it's a little bit about probability, it's a little bit about patience, and a lot of times you're just planting seed. And we're going to move on to Lee. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we're trying to leave extra time for questions at the end. And also, if you have any tips that you want to share from your outreach efforts, that would be great to hear.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to be talking about one specific example that Kestrel and partners did some outreach in the last few years. It is atypical in scale, but it hopefully will exemplify quite a lot of the concepts that Nick was talking about. About 5 or so years ago, Kestrel did a lot of fundraising and was able to employ some extra people. I was one of those. And when you've got a new person on board, you can sort of think differently. You can think, what can we do different than what we have been doing? So one of the things was, can we think more broadly? Can we think of a larger project that might not have happened in the past? At that stage, there was a lot of federal funding out there, and there was a lot of interest in how can we use some of that federal funding. There's obviously a lot of conservation targets out there at the moment as well. We did a little bit of preliminary looking, and we thought, west of the Connecticut River, land parcels tend to be a bit bigger, so you get a bit of an economy of scale. Land prices are probably a little bit lower than on the east side, and this is the area in the Connecticut River Valley where Kestrel tended to work. And we just came up with an idea after some preliminary mapping. It seemed like there's a lot of landowners that have around 200 acres. Could we find 50 landowners and 10,000 acres of land? And we're lucky to buy a map in Massachusetts, so that was definitely what we were looking at. We wanted parcels that had a reasonable amount of biomap. So what I'm going to be talking about is this project that started with the name Go Big, and it's pretty catchy, so it's more catchy than Connecticut River Forest's Western Mass Headwaters Project, which was the formal name that we gave it in the end. So I'm going to be calling it Go Big, and just saying how we got through the outreach and just this current status of that project. So, we're looking to aggregate a lot of land. Forest Legacy, the US Forest Service Forest Legacy Program is a great program. You do need to aggregate quite a bit of land, but it covers 75% of project costs, which is great. In Massachusetts, we can apply for up to $20 million a year. It seemed like a good one to target. It does require land to be 75% forested. And the drawback about it is it does take a long time. From time of application to, first closing, if it's 3 years, you're really lucky. So it is a long-term project. We really need to have landowners on board and be relatively patient, or find other solutions to keep them there. So we made the decision to think about, what's the message going to be here? And we're obviously talking large acreage. We live in the Connecticut River catchment. Water is a great story to talk through. That's the map in the middle there, the Connecticut River catchment. On the right there is the Berkshire Wildlife Linkages, a well-established group of people, an RCP. Wildlife is another great story to have. So what we started talking about was the western portion of the Connecticut River catchment in Massachusetts. Initially, we weren't coming all the way down to the river because the parcels tend to be smaller, tends to be a bit more development, but it just was easy to define the areas like just that, the western portion of the Connecticut River catchment in Massachusetts. And you may or may not be able to see very well on that map, but we've got some biomap there, we've got the protected areas that are there, we've got some development, we've got Westfield River Wild and Scenic, which is a great story to bring in there, and the Appalachian Trail just skirts the edge there. So this was the decided project area. This is well outside where Kestrel typically operates, so that was going to be important to talk to all the different partners. And that's something we did both before, as we were sort of developing the idea, and the whole way. I mean, Kestrel has been the coordinator for sure, and but it's really been all these partners here and more. I did notice that the trustees is not written on there, I'm sorry to say. But I guess initially the trustees was a little bit less involved. At least you were through Hilltown Land Trust. So that was an oversight. But we also talked to regional planning authorities, we talked to UMass Extension, we talked to municipalities, Springfield Water. That's the other thing about the Forest Legacy Program is it does require a government holder pretty much for every parcel, either the fee or the CR. So that was a lot of the way we were thinking at the time. So just pure land trust ownership or land trust CR on private land wasn't going to work there. So that was something to keep in mind. You know, a broad area, there's a lot of people here that have a lot of expertise and a lot of organisations, and we needed to talk to all these people, and it's been really good to engage them all and get their thoughts. I mean, there are some areas of that project area that do have a regional land trust gap, but there are other areas where we overlap with regional land trusts, state, national land trusts, government agencies, all sorts of organisations. It was surprising how many organisations do work in Western Mass when you start looking for them. So, you know, all of a sudden you've got a lot of people, and definitely part of the role was herding everyone. And you can see Nick Rossi there, you can see Lee Halasz there. Other organisations in the room, Mass Wildlife, Berkshire Natural Resource Council, TNC, Franklin Land Trust, we're in the trustee's office, Hilltown was there, and you might see Mass Audubon represented by Dave Rothstein, who's no longer with us, but he was an amazing part of this project, incredibly enthusiastic, and he really did do a lot of the work in the end, starting to do a lot of the pre-acquisition. So yeah, he was as enthusiastic as anyone in this project for sure. And you know, who doesn't love sitting around maps and talking about areas? I mean, does it get any better than that as a land trust? So, I mean, most of the time we were meeting online, but we did get together several times like this. And the cake and coffee was just a bonus at that stage. So it was a partnership, so we're very lucky to have Jessica Dietrich at TNC do the final analysis of parcels that we were interested in. And what the other part of it that was great was she put this up on a web map, ArcGIS Online. The analysis was also not just finding parcels that are 100 acres or more, but finding the same landowners that own 100 acres or more, even if they're not contiguous. So there's a little bit of work there to figure that out. We did want at least 50 acres of biomap. We wanted at least 100 acres, like I said, for some economy of scale. And the great thing about this web map is you could click on one parcel, and if there was parcels under the same ownership somewhere else, they would flash up and you could just instantly get all the information about it. I can see in the future we will all exist and collaborate through this web map, because you can get in there, you can access information, you can edit it, you can leave notes and things. We certainly didn't get to that stage, and I think for some partners that would have been challenging to interact in that way. But I know TNC was excited to have this an opportunity to offer it to do this for us, and that could be a way that this works in the future. So we came up with about 550 landowners of interest, and I can't remember the exact number of acres, but I think it was well over 100,000 acres of people that we wanted to target. And then it was, okay, what next? So we had this big spreadsheet of landowners, and we wanted all the different partners to give us input. Like, have you talked to these people? Should we talk to these people or not? Are you interested in being the outreach to this person? Would you be interested in holding this land? There was all this information that was in all the different partners' heads that we wanted to try to capture. And this is going back to 1980s technology. We sent around an Excel spreadsheet. Please fill in these columns with what you know or what your interests are. Yeah, and captured all that. And the point being was, do we do outreach to these people? And sometimes a partner would say, no, just don't do outreach. Fine, that's it. We don't need any more information. You've told us not to do outreach. We're not going to do outreach. But then in the end, it was the allocation. So who is going to talk to this landowner, either by sending a letter, which most of it was, or there's already some existing connection or some conversation going on. And sometimes it did end up being two partners that were really doing the outreach. You can see some fig leaves on the left there, a little bit of privacy for the landowners. there was a lot of work in everyone filling in these spreadsheets, coming back to me and putting it into a usable format. But there's some amazing information there that we captured at times, and regularly I go back to it and other partners sort of say, what was the story with that one? Like, what comments did we get about that? So I think initially, I think I've got a slide about this in a minute, but I think initially, I mean, there was some enthusiasm for the project for sure, but there was certainly some skepticism about, do we have the capacity to get appraisals done? And, you know, is everyone going to be able to share things, particularly government partners? You know, they've got to be a lot more sensitive with how they share things. But I think over a few months and a bit more, it really came around to people were happy to share. They could really see those benefits. And it did also help that Kestrel got a really substantial private philanthropy fund that could help with due diligence. So not only were we working together, but we had some money to work together as well. And it has been suggested, you know, we're almost like the ultimate RCP, like we're doing things and we've got some money to do things. We're not an RCP, but really it is how we're functioning in a lot of ways. So then, landowner outreach piece. This is a lot longer letter than Nick had. This is what we did send out, more or less. So I think it was drafted, all the partners had some input. We did get Paul Catanzaro to provide his input to it and a few other people at UMass Extension. So we really did try to make this a letter that makes sense. And it's probably, I will step through it in a minute, what's there. But generally, initially, we sent a letter. Some of the landowners, it was some sort of one-on-one outreach because it made sense to whoever knew them. What we did do about a couple of months later is we sent a postcard, and we sort of wanted to hit them in another way if we could. And really what the hook was there was like we offered to do a webinar for people at some different times. Just thinking there could be a lot of out-of-state landowners that might appeal to them, or we're still just coming out of the COVID era and maybe people were comfortable with doing that. And we did get more people reaching out to us that way. We didn't actually ever end up doing any webinars. It wasn't a huge number that wanted a webinar, but it was another way to hit people and for them to get back to us. We also did follow up with phone calls, particularly for the larger landowners that had more acreage. And we actually, we had an attorney, I guess there's databases out there that you can sort of scroll the web and just get people's contact information. And we did use that service for some of these larger landowners. And we never had anyone question us, well, how do you have my phone number? But we sort of just had this line ready, well, there's publicly available information on the web and that's how we got your information. But it could be a service that's of interest to people. I mean, if you only get one or two, it's not good, but we did get quite a few that way. So that's how the outreach sort of went. So you can probably see it better on that screen. You know, basically the first paragraph there is, you know, forests are important. You know, you think they're important too. You know, you and your lands are important. Where there's a partnership, and you know, you can see all the logos here. We're working together to do some outreach. We wanted to say, you know, public and private funding. We're looking for 50 landowners. We do mention the Forest Legacy Program, and while that was the focus initially, thinking it's a big aggregated project, we can get a good amount of money. We always thought, look, there's other ways that some of this is probably going to happen, and as I'll tell you soon, it's pretty much all going to have to happen another way. And we will find a way for it to happen. But we did mention the Forest Legacy Program, you know, again, the fee CR thing that Nick mentioned. You know, this is a big decision, families involved, you know, we acknowledge that. There's a few different ways they could get back to me or whoever sent the letter, be that Mass Audubon or DCR or someone. You know, we can talk later and, you know, just thank you. So it is pretty long. It was hand signed, was handwritten envelopes, so we did do all that sort of thing. So yeah, it was quite a bit of a process to get there. I acknowledge it's long. I mean, if I got something that long in the mail, I don't know what I would do, but that's what we did.
But you had more to say.
We had very important things to say.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Well, you had a whole initiative to talk about, so
right.
It makes sense.
So then we got the exciting bit was we were getting responses. And, you know, again, how do we share this amongst everyone? Because it was a collaborative effort, and we ended up doing it in Google Sheets, which I think more or less suited everyone. I think the government partners might have had a little bit more trouble with Google than some, but, you know, sharing across the organisations is always challenging, and that was something that we, you know, did our best to work on. And this was where, yes, they've replied, yes, they're probably interested in fee, this is the key contact person, things like that. And again, a few fig leaves for privacy there. This was the exciting bit. What we also did initially was get Landvest to do a market analysis in the project area. So basically, we asked them to look at sales in the last 5 years in pretty much all these towns, and there was 40 odd, and to give us sort of an approximate dollars per acre per town. And I think it was useful in itself, especially when we started talking to landowners, but the other part was it got Landvest, who's here today, they've got a table, ready to do appraisals for us when we're ready, and we were likely to have to do quite a few. So then we got restricted appraisals when a landowner was sort of more interested that was specifically targeted to that land. But the initial market analysis gave us a sense. Like as I was saying, Forest Legacy is a long-term project. So it's not as though we're going to get the final appraisal straight up, particularly a yellow book. So we needed to get some initial numbers to help a conversation. So that was good. And the last of the fig leaves right there. So outcome, we did get a 10.5% response rate, and I think that's pretty good for any sort of outreach. And there was multiple barrels to it, well thought out, often from a local partner. So we did what we could to try to increase that chance. We did get 42 landowners and suspiciously close to 10,000 acres, I will say, but that's how it turned out. Slight overachieving on the 10,000. But yeah, very happy with the way it turned out. And the acres that we did, they're good acres. 43% of those acres are biomap core and 92% of biomap core are critical natural landscapes. So these are quality forested habitats. We have unfortunately just recently lost our celebrity landowner. It doesn't look like they're going to be in, but that would have been a nice bit of the story as well. Whoops. So Forest Legacy, there's a bit of a story there. We did submit that in 2024. The ranking wasn't ideal, and some could say there was some red-blue motivations in how the states were ranked. I think we've seen some of that out there. So we submitted again in September 2025. That President's budget associated with that is meant to be released soon, and we'll see what the ranking is there. Anyway, we've largely, a strange way, moved on from even thinking about Forest Legacy, and if it happens, it happens, but we've got a pretty good plan B for a lot of those acres. I would say at least 2/3, and not least of which because Mass Audubon has their Catalyst Fund and has been doing a lot of pre-acquiring a lot of those acres. So we get them into a stage where we don't have to work with the landowner anymore, they're here, and they can go to DFG or various places in due course, or they're just sitting and waiting for another grant program to come through. So Forest Legacy might have been the excuse to reach out, it might have been the structure. We always thought, look, it's not the only way, and maybe the other ways will be the only ways. So, thank you. We're very happy to take questions. Hopefully that gave some ideas associated with what Nick was talking about, even if it is a bit of an atypical example, just being quite broad scale. So we can turn that on. Yeah.
Question right away. Of those, now you're sort of under a new way of operating. Have you prioritized the folks you've heard from? And how have you been able to do that?
So everyone that's contacted us and is interested, will find a way. We'll make it work. So, it might be a drinking water grant because that's what the land, it's in a catchment, or it may be DFG had some money that was from federal funds that actually was there, so that got used.
Fish and Game?
Yes, Mass Wildlife Division of Fish and Game. I'm not sure where, yes, if we're prioritising it, it's probably landowner readiness and a grant that seems to match for the moment. So, no, we're confident of doing all of those acres, even if it's not through Forest Legacy at all.
What did you ask for from the those landowners to get a commitment from them? Was it just a verbal commitment in order to move forward Forest Legacy? Do you have agreements with them?
So the Forest Legacy program did require a letter from the landowner saying, I understand I'm being included in this application. So we have not gone beyond that unless we're starting to talk about a purchase and sale agreement. But initially it was just that letter for the Forest Legacy program, and we were happy to do an appraisal or whatever needed to happen to get to that point. Like I said, that was the initial point, but yeah, we didn't ask a lot from them really.
Yeah, it was a lot of, I think a lot of it depended on like urgency for the particular owners, whether because they wanted to move forward or they had. Oh, sorry.
Is this on?
Yes.
I think
It is
so.
on.
No,
maybe not.
maybe not.
Takes 3 seconds apparently when you turn it on.
Okay. Nope.
Does seem to be on. We're not working with that mic.
Okay. We can go. I'll go over here.
I think this will now work.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
There you go.
Too many buttons.
So I was just saying, a lot of it had to do with how urgently the landowner had to move ahead.
Sure. Yeah, go for it. Anne, yeah.
Did you reconnect with the landowners, a year later when they all resigned or not?
Yeah, that was a really important bit early on when we thought, okay, we put this application in and it's going to be 5 years until we actually close on this. So we did make a deliberate effort every season to just send a letter, not necessarily saying much, but just please don't forget about us. We haven't forgotten about you. Hope you enjoy winter, something like that. But it's within a year or so, it got to the stage where someone, be it Nick or someone else, was talking to that landowner fairly regularly in a detail basis. So they weren't sitting out there in the void anyway by that stage. But yes, for 18 months or so, it's a good point. We did really want to keep in contact with them so they didn't forget about us.
Have they all signed off on a value for the land?
No. And because if we were looking at Forest Legacy, it's 5 years. So the appraisal needs to be in 5 years' time. Like that will be the final dollar value. And we did really have to explain that. Like, here's an approximate value now, but until 5 years' time, we don't actually know what the value is going to be. So as the land's been pre-acquired or something, yes, there has been a purchase and sale agreement or something with a current appraisal. But yeah, given with that program, there's no way you can tell them what you're going to pay them in 5 years' time. They have to have some faith that, it'll be appropriate at the time.
So they can back out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it also depends. So, some of the landowners, at least the ones that I worked with, some of them were actually okay with not having like a value. They were all right with just waiting. And then some of them, I think the ballpark was very helpful to at least kind of give them order of magnitude with the understanding that we would appraise it and then we'd get the final value later on, as we were saying.
Do you have any sense of, what landowners responded to the letter versus what landowners responded to like personal contacts or reach out?
I think the reality is most of the ways we reached out to most people was letter. So I think
The letter was very effective.
I think so. Like I said, I know the postcard got a few more that the letter didn't for unknown reasons. I know sometimes the phone call after those two things was helpful as well. But most seem to respond just from the letter phase that we actually eventually got.
To my point earlier about delayed reactions, there were a couple of landowners that, at least just in my experience, there were a few landowners that received the letter and never got back to go big, but then eventually got back to us later on for whatever reason.
Right, it's that planting a seed thing.
Yep.
I know there's a landowner that came to us just about a year ago. We sent them the letter, we sent them the postcard, nothing, and yet at some point they reached out to the conservation community. So maybe those things helped, maybe they didn't. Maybe they weren't ready when those things arrived, who knows, but.
Generally speaking, how frequently will you, or would you suggest reaching out to those priority landowners who just aren't responding? You're doing the handwritten note to them and not getting anything. What's, in your view, what's too much?
I think more frequently than a year. Is that? I think a year at most. I think it's good to space it out. If you're not getting a response, like I do have those properties where I really would like to talk to someone. That's when I think I start putting a little more time into trying to find someone that they know, or someone that knows them. Because that's often how I've gotten things unstuck.
Right, a letter year after year, but finding a personal contact or something might be the better way over the time.
Yeah, I think it's, just one other thing. I do think it's okay to keep sending letters infrequently over time, because, you know, things change over time. Like, you know, that person might not be getting back to you because, you know, they might have just something going on, like maybe they're a caretaker for a parent or something like that, and then later on they're able to make more space to work with you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this workshop. In what you said about there's a lot of competition when sending letters from developers, solar developers, and so on, did you learn anything from landowners who got back to you about why they decided to go the conservation route as opposed to the development route? And does that inform your current outreach?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
I would say in my experience, I would say it's usually pretty rare when I work with someone who's just purely motivated by finances. Usually there's something there about how they want to protect the land for whatever reason. So I think that's really playing a big role.
Yeah, I mean, they might not say they're interested in conservation, but I think, like you said, there's probably often something under there that they like the idea of it.
Yeah, and it might not come out right away. This is harkening back to don't make assumptions, but like you might, I've like definitely talked with some people where it seems like all they care about is like money when you first talk with them, but as you like kind of delve a little deeper, you learn like, oh, they used to camp on the property all the time when they were a kid or something like that, so.
Well, sometimes there's some family members that are more interested in conservation than others, and they'll try to steer it towards conservation or explore that option as well when maybe some of the other siblings really wouldn't care less.
And the handwritten letters, handwritten envelopes. I've had multiple people tell me that's why they, or they like the presentation anyway. So I don't know if that was the reason, but it helped. So.
Even with your messy writing.
Yes.
Is the letters handwritten or just the envelope?
Just the envelope.
Okay.
And a signature.
But I think people just get these things in the mail and then just throw them in the trash. So it's the fact that they open the envelope, not like, oh, he wrote it, I must call him back. So.
You had mentioned earlier about the cost-benefit analysis of very good events. So I was just wondering about, but if you're thinking of like community education events, I mean, I know some that have happened, I guess, in southern Vermont, where there's like residents of an area, you know, getting together in the evening, and then there'd be a presentation, you know, like just in case, trying to see who might be interested. It wasn't like targeted parcels or something like that. And I don't know what, yeah, it was very informative, but is that the kind of event you're thinking, like cost-benefit analysis of whether that is going to really bring in respondents?
Yeah. So some of that, and also the targeted. I think both kinds of events. A lot of it is just comes down to the amount of work that goes into like putting one of those together. Like, at least in my personal experience, it's hard to just even write the letter and get it in the mail, just to find the time to do that. So just doing the events is just even more time. So.
And I think UMass Extension facilitates a lot of those with forest landowners. Yep. Mount Grace, I think, has done a lot with farmland in the past, maybe not so much recently. Farmland seems to be one where it happens. I mean, I'm not sure Kestrel's ever done a lot, but if we're really interested in, say, Mount Toby or some specific geographical area, we may well do that if there was a good reason to be working there or a funding source for there or something like that. Yeah, there is a lot of work in organising events and rain dates or snow dates half the year and all that sort of thing.
I'm a part of the land protection team. I support outreach, but I was curious if you've ever taken an approach where you protected a property and you reached out to the neighbors to say, hey, we're your new neighbor, and perhaps have a smaller event for them to explore the relationship, and if that's ever led into land protection.
Have you done that?
We've sent letters based on newly protected land to abutters, partly, hello, we're your neighbour, and sometimes it's largely at that level. Sometimes it's a bit more, we're your neighbour, and are you interested in land conservation? Sometimes you just want to let them know you're an abutter now. But have we actually done events like that? Maybe some celebrations more than aren't really necessarily along the lines of, we want to protect your land. But again, planting the seed, perhaps.
Yeah, I do think if you have had a big project in an area, that's not a bad time to send some letters or something like that, if you haven't done it in a little while. Because I do feel like sometimes these things sort of build organically, the neighbors talk to each other, and so there may have been some groundwork that's already been set.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't done events like that, but I have had a lot of synergistic effects with, I bought one piece of property and then I approached the neighbors and said, oh, I don't know if you heard, but I just recently bought this one. And Irene's committee likes when you do a couple of different projects right next to each other, and so I have a better chance of ranking higher, and I'm talking to your neighbor, and I think they might be interested, but you might could be, part of this project to protect this whole area. And I've found that sometimes it's a snowball effect.
I can actually think of one example where we did, it was actually really led by the town rather than Kestrel, but they did a lot of outreach to landowners. And over a couple of years, it became a couple of landscape partnership grants that were very successful. But I guess Kestrel assisted, but it was probably really the town and some really interested people in the town, Conservation Commission, Planning Board, etc., that were the passion and the drive to have an event. Kestrel was very happy to help out and be part of that, and it was a very successful land protection project.
I'm wondering if either of you have any tips for working with landowners who are getting on in years and are kind of on the fence about whether they want to make a decision about their land or whether they want to leave that decision to their children. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm concerned about what the children might want to do with the property as compared to the older generation.
I've certainly talked to a few landowners that I've raised my kids right, they're going to value this land, I trust them, I don't want to protect it. I'm not going to say a lot to that, but it's like, well, maybe it'll work out like that. I've had some landowners say to me, I don't trust my kids. I'm in control of the land now. I'm doing this. I guess, again, it's just listening to them, seeing what they have to say. I mean, if they're really concerned about it, you could say, well, that's, you own the land now. You determine its future while it's yours. I think sometimes people also get to an age where they may be careless or they feel like it's too late, or their health. I feel like sometimes people get past caring or think they can do something about it. So it's nice to hit them before that. But yeah, there seems to be a variety out there of how landowners think about their kids or the next generations.
Yeah, I mean, before you finished your question, I was going to say, well, talking with the kids can sometimes be good, but if you know that you don't want to talk to the kids, then obviously that's not a good strategy. Again, I think finding someone that they trust that can kind of be an ambassador for you is really helpful. I'm thinking of an elderly woman that I'm working with right now who is very reluctant or concerned about conserving her land. She was, and I ended up connecting with one of her neighbors who helps her out a lot, and he was able to kind of help me talk her through things and kind of back up what I was saying, and that was enormously helpful.
Yeah, just somehow being out there and talking, it's I guess all you can do in getting a feel for them.
Yeah.
Over the back.
You may have already answered this, but was there a time of year you sent those letters to landowners? Like, is there any strategy around that?
We did send it in spring, and I'm not sure it was that strategic. It was maybe more time frames that had to, but right, it's a really good point. I mean, I don't think you want to send something to farmers in spring, for example. Like, I'm not sure that's going to be a good idea. But I don't know if different farmers, what time of year is best. I would say we didn't for that, but I think it's a really good point. Yeah. When a landowner's more likely, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, yeah, maybe don't send it that time, you know.
Yeah, or the summer. Sending something in August.
Now, what do you think is the best time of year?
Winter?
The excitement of March and April right now, like land, like isn't it amazing? Yeah. Sick of winter in February? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there any easy way to plant the seed that if they don't do something, that the inherent impact on their kids might push the land to be sold rather than protected? I mean, when do you sort of, is that a real concern? I mean, is that what often drives?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one.
It's just, I've heard that, you know, I'm just leaving it to my kids, but I feel like saying, well, if you just leave it to your kids, this is, you're burdening them with a big asset that they may not be ready to try to manage.
Oh no, I agree. No, it's a good point.
You don't want to tell them what to do either, so I'm just wondering.
I mean, I guess there's a lot of estate planning stuff out there that UMass Extension does. I mean, I think Mount Grace has been part of that and some of their farmland stuff. I mean, we're not going to coach them about that, but we might point them to, I regularly point people to Mass Woods and say, look, there's some really good stuff there to think about.
When that, like how to manage your legacy, that?
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff on there about estate planning. I mean, every now and then workshops get run.
It means they have to go look something up. I'm just wondering if there's some quick little caveat you could like get them thinking.
I would honestly just come at it from just asking them some questions about what the future of their property is. Like, you know, have you thought about like what's going to happen to this land, like with the next, you know, do you know what your long-term plans are, and then just kind of get them thinking about like, oh well, you know, I'm not sure if George or Anna will really be interested in land. I don't know. It just at least get them thinking about it. Right. Yeah.
I mean,
That's how I would approach it.
I don't think I really want to shock people or put them off, or you know, you know, there's a fine line there. Like information, ask questions. Like it's like trying to convince a family member about anything. Like you got to be careful how much you present especially at one time.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll ask people like, have you talked with your kids about this? Just straight up and just like, you know, learn. Mm-hmm. Kind of go off of what they say.
We must be close to time. I remind people that this talk is being recorded. Just letting you all know. Okay.
Now you know.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.